Okay, here we go with lesson 8-7, multiplying polynomials. And when we're multiplying two polynomials together, let's first start with multiplying two binomials together and look how that works. Let's say we have the binomial x plus 3 times the binomial x plus 2. Alright, we're going to show you two different methods. First of all, I'm going to show you the vertical method, in which you line up the two binomials one over the other, and then you multiply the second term of the bottom binomial times each term in the top binomial. And when we do that, we get 2 times 3 is 6, and then 2 times x is 2x. And that's half of our multiplication problem. We now have to move from the first term to the second term on the bottom equation and multiply it. X times 3 is 3x, and notice how I line it up so that it's in line with its like term, the partner term 2x above. And then x times x is x squared. And now they're all lined up by the degree of each term, and then I add them together and I get my final answer, x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now let's take a look at the horizontal method of doing that. In the horizontal method, you start from your original two binomials, and then you take each term of the first binomial and multiply it times the whole second binomial. So x times x squared, x plus 2, plus 3 times x plus 2. And you then carry that out, distribute each of those out. We get x times x times 2, 3 times x, and 3 times 2. And then we rewrite that with everything written correctly. X squared, 2x, plus 3x, plus 6. We notice that the 2x and the 3x are like terms, so we can combine them together, and we come up with our final answer of x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now let's use the arrow method. And in the arrow method, we do a lot of the same stuff we've already done. But in the arrow method, we take our two original equations and we draw arrows from the first term to each of the terms in the second binomial, and we do the same thing with the second term of the first binomial to each of the terms in the second binomial. And as we do the arrow, we see what's being multiplied. X times x gives us x squared. X times 2 gives us 2x. 3 times x gives us 3x. 3 times 2 gives us 6. And when you add those all together, you end up with x squared plus 5x plus 6. And you'll notice that we have the same answer in all three of these problems, just three different methods for solving the same problem. Then there's a special method that works for binomials when you have two binomials called FOIL. FOIL stands for first, outside, inside, last. And what does that mean? That basically means that when you're multiplying the two numbers together, let's see if we can see that right here. When you're multiplying the two numbers together, you have the first number, x, times the first x. So there's your F line, first, and you get x squared for your first numbers. Then your outside numbers is x times 2. Outside number is 2x. Your inside number, 3 times x. Inside is 3x. And finally, your outside number, x, or 3 times 2, is the last. So first, outside, inside, last. And when you set it all done, you notice that these two can be added together, and you end up with x squared plus 5x plus 6, which is the same answer we've got before. Okay, now let's move on to example 2, and we're going to go ahead and use the FOIL method again in example 2, and I've already drawn it out for you. Here's the x minus 5 times x plus 7, and I've drawn the F arrow for FOIL first. X times x, and there's your, you can see it, x times x, I've drawn it out in detail, is x squared. Your outside is x times 7. X times 7 gives us 7x. Your inside, negative 5 times x, so negative 5 times x for the inside number is negative 5x. And finally the outside numbers, and finally the last numbers, there we are, the L, negative 5 times 7, negative 5 times 7 is negative 35. And I notice once again that I have like terms, so 7x minus 5x gives me 2x, and my final answer is x squared plus 2x minus 35. Now let's look at the same thing, except this time I'm not going to draw the arrows. I'm just going to do FOIL, and I go 2y for first times first is 6y. 2y times 6y. The outside, 2y times negative 7, 2y times negative 7. Inside, 3 times 6y, 3 times 6y. And last, 3 times negative 7. When you do all that multiplication, you get 12y squared minus 14y plus 18y minus 21. And I notice that those two y's can be combined. Negative 14 and 18 give me positive 4. So my final answer is 12y squared plus 4y minus 21. Now let's take a look at example number 3. In example number 3, we're given a trapezoid, and we're said, please figure out the area of this trapezoid. Okay, well, we have a top base of 3x minus 7, a bottom base of 2x plus 1, okay, and a height of x plus 2. Well, the area of a trapezoid is 1/2 height times the sum of your two bases. So if we substitute these values into that equation, this is what we get. 1/2 height, x plus 2, times the summation of our two bases. Base 1 is 3x minus 7, and base 2 is 2x plus 1. And there we are. Now, I use the arrow method to multiply. First thing I did was I combined 3x and 2x to 5x, and negative 7 to plus 1 to negative 6. Now I use the arrow method to multiply these two binomials times each other. And what I ended up with is 1/2 x times 5x is 5x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. 2 times 5x is positive 10x, and 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. That gives me, when I combine these two like terms, negative 6x and 10x, to positive 4x. So I still have 1/2 times 5x squared plus 4x minus 12. I now distribute the 1/2 to each of those, and I get 5 over 2 x squared. 4 times 1/2 is 2, so plus 2x, and negative 12 times 1/2 is negative 6. And there's the final answer. Now let's look at example 4. Example 4. We're going to use the FOIL method. Notice this time it's not binomials, it's a trinomial on the right hand side. So we're going to do this again. I'm going to get this arrow and I'm going to go here. I'm going to use the arrow method. So 4x times 2x squared gives me 8x cubed. Then I continue that arrow on to the next guy. I got 4x times negative 5x gives me negative 20x squared. And finally, continuing that guy to the last term, I get 4x times 3 is positive 12x. Now I'm going to do the second term. 9 times 2x squared, 18x squared. Carry the arrow to the next term. 9 times negative 5x is negative 45x. And finally, carry that arrow all the way over to the 3. 9 times 3 is 27. Now I need to combine like terms. So I notice that there's only one x cubed term, so I'm just going to carry it down to the next item. Now let's look at all my x squared terms. I'll draw them with 2 underlines. Well, there's two of them, so I got negative 20 plus 18. That gives me a negative 2x squared. Now, what's all my single terms with just the x on them? I got a positive 12 and negative 45, so that's minus 33x. And finally, I have a single term right here. And I guess I'll give it 4 lines to say that it's by itself, and that's plus 27. And there is my answer. Okay, let's look at the next example. Example 4b, here it is. All right, looking at example 4b. What do we have? Now we have a trinomial times a trinomial. I'm going to show you a little trick. Whenever I have 3 terms times 3 terms, when I use the arrow method, like I did up above, I should end up with the number of terms in my second layer before I do any kind of combining of like terms. I should equal 3 times 3, or I should have 9 terms across here. Well, let's take a look. Did that happen up here? We had 2 terms times 3. We should end up with 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we did. Then we combined them to get our final answer. So let's do that here. Start with our first arrow. Comes all the way across, gets that guy. Y squared times 6y squared gives me 6y to the 4th. Okay? Now, I carry that on to this guy, and I get y squared times negative 3y gives me negative 3y to the 3rd. And then I carry it on to the last guy. Y squared times 1 is just y squared. Now I'm going to do the middle term. Carry him over. 2y times 6y squared is negative 12y cubed. Carry that line on again. I got negative 2y times negative 3y is positive 6y squared. And I finally carry it on to the 1. I get a negative 2y. Now I've done 2 of my first 3 terms. Now I got to do this guy. I'm going to make him a little bit bigger circle for his arrow. 5 times 6y is 30y squared. Carry that guy to the middle guy. And 5 times negative 3 is negative 15y. And carry him on to the last guy there. 5 times 1 is 5. Now I need to find like terms. Well, I'm going to start by saying 1, 2, 3, 4. There's an x to the 4th, and I look all the way through here, or y to the 4th, and there is no more y to the 4th, so 6y to the 4th is good. Carry it down. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, y to the 3rd, 1, 2, 3, y to the 3rd, no other y to the 3rds, so I got a negative 3 and a negative 12, gives me a minus 15, y to the 3rd. Now let's look at y squareds. There's a y squared, there's a y squared, there's a y squared. So I get 1 plus 6 is 7, plus 30 is 37. And then I look at y's. I got minus 2 and minus 15. That's minus 17y. And I have nothing here. Okay, so the 5 just comes down by itself. And I've now covered all my terms, and that is my answer.